Hi, good morning.
Hello.
We might have low numbers today, and that's okay. So, yeah. I'm Nicole Johnson, and I'm glad y'all could attend. Oh, here's Haley.
Slowly but surely, people are coming.
Yeah.
It's
Got a
Friday.
few people who said they couldn't attend, but they wanted the recording. So there's always that. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Are we ready, Nicole?
Yeah. Let's get started.
Get started. Good morning, everybody. We have a full screen. I hope you are having beautiful weather as we are today. I am Chris Pernell, the Program Director for Partners in Health and Wholeness with the North Carolina Council of Churches. We really appreciate you being with us this morning. If you are not familiar with PHW, I'll give you a very brief introduction. And if you have questions about anything, please put it in the chat box and we will be happy to give you more information. So PHW is a program of the council that has been around for over 11 years. And we've worked with hundreds of faith communities all across the state in their health ministries, whatever that looks like for them and for their communities. Our focus has always been on healthier eating, active living, mental health, and tobacco and nicotine education. For the last about 4 years, we've been also heavily involved in overdose prevention across North Carolina and kind of spreading the gospel known as harm reduction to try to save lives due to accidental overdose deaths. And then last year, we started working in HIV education. We had a new grant in July. So we have a lot of things going on. We have a special focus on healthier aging. And again, a lot of response to COVID. So tons and tons of resources on our website, on our YouTube channel. We invite you to sign up for our newsletter and just let us know how we may help you or your community. We're pretty excited. We've talked for a long time about kind of getting into the lane of faith, health, and our environment. So this is the launch. This is the very first event that we are doing as PHW focused on the environment and our faith and health. Nicole Johnson is leading that effort for us. She is, as you probably all, I think already know, leads our special projects and denominational support. So I am going to turn it over now. Again, if you have any questions, let us know. Happy to expand. But I wanted to turn it over to my colleague, Jessica Stokes, to get us centered this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chris. Please join me in prayer. Thank you, God, for the ordinary, for the everyday hum, the parts of our day that we do not think twice about, for the ways that our lives can expect certainty when certainty is still rare in the world, with these ordinary pieces that we depend so much on without acknowledging. We give thanks for the way that the ordinary gives us life, supports us, replenishes us, and keeps us alive. We give thanks for the privilege of not having to think too much about it. We know some of these ordinary resources like water, clean air, quiet, warmth are rare for many in the world. And we know deep inside that there is actually little that is ordinary about it. We give thanks for the everyday parts of our lives that when we reflect, remind us of how fortunate we are. We give thanks to a God who created a world full of ordinary elements that we are called to protect and provide for those in need, reminding us in holy ways of our human fragility and need for God and for each other. Thank you, God, for all that we have, and be with those that are in need. Amen. I'll now hand it off to Nicole.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see a couple familiar faces. This is our first webinar that's going to be in a series for our Environment, Faith, and Health pilot initiative. So we haven't done it before, hence the pilot initiative part. We are happy to be partnering with the Citizen Science Hub from North Carolina State University. And we have a couple of representatives here today. We have Nicole Esch, who's the director of Crowd the Tap, which is one of the citizen science projects that will be a part of the initiative where participants get to have their water tested for lead. Hence, our first webinar is around water. And we have Haley Smith, who works in Dr. Karen Cooper's lab. She heads up the Citizen Science Hub. Y'all could say hi. I'll let you just maybe take a minute and introduce yourselves. They'll be the main contacts when you sign up for the Citizen Science Project and sign up for the pilot initiative. So.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all of you here today. Yeah, so I am the person that most people will be in contact with when you need materials or instructions. And I'm around. I'm happy to help you whenever you need it.
And hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My headphones got a little wet this morning, so okay, great. So my name's Haley. Like Nicole Johnson said, I work with Dr. Karen Cooper, who is also helping spearhead this partnership. And we've been really excited. We've been waiting a long time to get this going, and we're just so excited to be working with all of you, and hope you learned a little bit from us, and we look forward to learning from you all as well.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And thank you, Jessica, for the lovely centering prayer. We're not going to tarry. So what I'm going to do, we're going to have kind of a 20-minute presentation talking about water in the context of religious rituals and theology, kind of the context of water in our everyday life, right? We don't always think about it. I don't know. We maybe think about it when we're like, oh, did I drink enough water today? I mean, that's kind of the main time. You're like, oh, did I drink enough water today, right? Or it's raining and you're like, oh, I got to go outside and I got to go to work, or I got to get the kids to school. So I'm gonna do a 20-minute presentation. I'm really excited because I have a background both in sustainability and divinity, and to talk about ordinary things in the context of faith and in the context of through a different lens, through a lens of faith, but also realizing and putting us in the web and in the network of all of life gets me really excited. So this is, I'm glad to remind you about water, Krista. So this is very exciting for me. Usually I end up staying in the lane of kind of faith and health. So this intersection and what we'll be able to do, I think, will be really exciting because it's not something we always talk about. So holy, sacred, and beautifully ordinary water, H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen at the most basic level. And it has properties that make it unique. It has properties that make life possible here on Earth. Like, we've not found any other planet. We've not found any other place where water exists in this way that allows for life to thrive. It makes life possible. We see it in different forms every day. We don't always think about it. We see rivers, we see streams, might see the sea, we might see the ocean. It's in our bodies. We don't always think about it unless, you're like Krista, and I reminded her that she needed to drink some water today. Rain, tears, holy water. We don't necessarily see it in gas form all the time. Water vapor, or we talk about the humidity, right? We live in the South, so it's kind of like, oh my gosh, come July, August, we're just like, what is happening? Humidity, clouds. When you're sick, maybe you use steam. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. Water, different forms. Solid, ice, snow, ice sheets, glaciers. We may not always see them. I mean, we're in North Carolina, so we're not going to be seeing ice sheets and glaciers. We might hear about them and then forget about them. But in all those forms, I don't know that we always think, oh, water, that our tears, water, right? With other dissolved elements and substances in water, or holy water when we're blessing babies. What are the ways that we use it? Drinking, bathing, or at least you hope your children bathe, like mine don't always like to. There's another mom on here and she totally knows what I'm saying. In our bodies, for our blood to flow, there has to be a part of our bodies that has water. The salty tears. How else do we see it? Rain, hurricanes, floods, snow, ice. When you're in your faith community, different faiths use water in different ways. So some may apply to you and some may not. Pouring during a baptism, healing rituals, clergy washing their hands before a particular ritual, immersion, right? If you're Baptist or one of the other faith traditions where complete immersion, the whole body in water. I don't know that we always think about that it's water, that without it, nothing, we would not exist. How else do we use it? Cooking, cleaning, all of those different ways. Very ordinary, right? Every day there's water. Beautifully ordinary. And we connect it to sacred rituals all the time. So words that have been connected to water include clean or dirty. In the ordinary, cooking, cleaning, we use words like clean or dirty. When we've immersed something in water and used water, we then talk about that thing being clean. We've used words like purification. So I feel like I'm using different words intentionally, the ordinary and the sacred. Clean, dirty, purification, healing, water of life, fountain of life. All these are different words that we use to frame and talk about water. And there's this blending of like ordinary and sacred, and we're not always conscious of it. So many different religious traditions use water. In Judaism, we have somebody who's Jewish here. I'm not picking on you, Katie, but a mikveh before conversion, marriage, a Shabbat, a Sabbath, sexual relations after a menstrual cycle. In Islam, water cleansing to prepare for the 5 daily prayers. Hinduism, cleansing before prayer. There's a specific river, even whole bodies of water have been considered sacred by some religious traditions. In Hinduism, the river Ganges in India, the whole river is considered sacred. And it's believed that bathing in that water washes away sin. In Christianity, we use water in baptism. There's lots of stories that involve healing. The story of Naaman, cured in the waters of the Jordan. It's mentioned the word water over 700 times in the Bible. I come from a Christian tradition, over 700 times. I think it's actually 722. More than faith, more than the word love, more than the word prayer. Water. Other traditions, Shintoism, Taoism. So human beings have seen water as not just ordinary, right? But also sacred. So we use it and then we put them in our religious rituals, but we don't always hold the two together. And what I'm hoping is that through this pilot initiative, we'll be able to talk about ordinary things in our environment, where we are a part of a network and we are a part of a web, and we get to see those things as ordinary and sacred. 70 to 75% of Earth's surface is water. We live on a watery planet. We talk about the land part all the time. 70% of an adult's body is water. About 80 to 85% of an adult's brain is water. Like water. So why is it that when we think about water in our religious rituals, and when it's blessed, we even bless water, and then it suddenly goes from water to holy water in Catholicism, right? If a clergy person, a priest blesses the water, then the water's holy. Why is the water not holy before the priest blessed it? Is it not already holy? When we go to the beach and we're at the ocean or the sea, is that water holy or sacred? When we bathe babies, when we sit near a stream. So one of the things I'm hoping is to just generate thought and discussion about the place of water for us in the ordinary, but also for us in the sacred, because it's important. 771 million people globally lack what they call basic services, access to water. So 3/4 of the world's population has access to safe water. That still leaves 1 out of 4 people, right? That's a lot of people. 282 million of that 771 have limited water service, where the way that they get to collect water is not from an improved source, or it might be from an improved source, but their collection exceeds 30 minutes. It takes them 30 minutes to get usable water. 367 million of that 771, their water source is unimproved. It's not made safe. It doesn't go through a water system. It's not made safe for human use. 122 million directly from streams and rivers. There is no improvement, no nothing. You get your container, your whatever, and you get that water. Nationally, let's bring it down a little bit. Locally, in the United States, so currently larger scale statistics, greater than 98% of the US population has access to adequate water services. Okay, so that sounds really good, right? That sounds great until we remember 5 years ago, there was a Flint, Michigan. Or until we remember, currently there's water systems all over this country who are receiving a letter grade D or an F for inadequate water infrastructure. So hidden in that very good sounding greater than 98% part is that in Appalachia, in pockets all over this country, there's inadequate water infrastructure. And even in those places, there are churches and congregations and faith communities, right, who use water to baptize their babies and immerse themselves in water to be blessed or to be healed, or use water for cooking and cleaning, and use water for drinking and bathing, and drink water because we literally cannot survive without water. And hidden in that greater than 98% is the injustice around water rights for First Peoples. Hidden in that greater than 98% is that most of the infrastructure, a lot of the infrastructure is not receiving great scores for good, the pipes haven't been updated, they're aging, and there's not always enough funding, and it's not always a priority to update the water infrastructure. Hidden in that 98% is climate impacts on water sources. So your water has to come from somewhere. You go to church, you bless the baby. That water didn't just come from the pipe, like that water came from a river or a stream. Your community exists in a watershed and a water basin. The water comes from somewhere. We're not just separate and a part of ourselves, not a part of a network. That water comes from somewhere. Like I've never been to a religious ritual. I don't think I've been to one where there was a sign that said this water came from, I don't know, the Catawba Basin or the Yadkin River, or they don't ever tell me where that water comes from. It's just there, and I assume it's good, and I assume it's fine. And we don't acknowledge it in our religious spaces. We just use it, right? We don't think about it. I also want to tie in another part for the numbers where I was talking about the people who have to collect their water and it takes them longer than 30 minutes to get water that's safe, or their water is completely unimproved, or they just get it directly from a flowing stream or river. In most of those places, the water collection burden falls on, I'm gonna see if anybody can guess. The burden falls on who to collect the water?
Women.
Girls and women. So girls and women. So tied up in all of this about water, there's the ordinary and the sacred, and there's the beauty of water, and there is life, and we are within a network, and all these things, all tied up in that is how it is that we as human beings exist in a network and see ourselves in that network. There's parts about how do we take care of, we use a lot of language about being caretakers. And I think I would like to use this pilot to challenge our thinking about us just being caretakers of creation. We use that language a lot in a lot of religious traditions. And if we talk about water, we could talk about water as whether or not it's clean or dirty, or whether or not it's improved or not, or whether or not we have access to it. We can talk about things like water rights and First Peoples and pollution and all those things. But I think a basic idea that needs to be challenged is that water is not just for us. To not always talk about it in a way that talks about whether or not we can get it. What if we expanded our theology about caring for the least of these and being caretakers? It ends up being tied a lot to our own preservation, as if the existence of water and trees and soil and animals and all of creation, as if it just exists for us and for our purposes and for our use. So we should take care of it because we should be able to use it. And if we don't take care of it, then there might not be enough of it. And somehow it turns into we become the whole center of everything. And we are not always the center of everything. We're a part of everything. So what if we expanded our theology and the least of these and caretakers becomes more of we're a part of a whole, and things and all of the things that exist in our environment, including water, exists for itself. It just exists because it is. It has value, not just because we need it. So what if we saw water as a gift, and we looked at water with wonder, and we looked at water as both sacred and ordinary? So what could that look like in our religious spaces? Naming the places where we get our water. Like, that's really simple. Like, that is a simple thing to do? What if we had maps that named our river basins? We got bulletin boards all the time. Like, we put a lot of stuff on there in our bulletins. So what if we had specific times of the year where we had blessings just for water? What if in our youth groups and children ministries that we allow a curriculum that allows for play and learning at a space that has water? We put our kids inside the church building a whole lot, right? Or inside our religious spaces. What if we incorporated more outdoor worship near water spaces? What if we made actively learning about the water in our communities something that we intentionally do? And we have experts like Nicole Esch and Haley Smith come to our faith communities to talk to us about our river basin and the places where we live and the water in our communities, and whether or not everybody actually has access to safe water, and whether or not everybody who sits in our seats at our religious spaces, whether or not their pipes are clean, because Nicole can test that, get that water tested for people, you know what I mean? We can find out if there's lead, we can find out whether or not we might have a place that's another Flint, Michigan. So I'd like to just take a minute. I know there was some stuff in the chat, and I'd like to ask if anybody has any thoughts or questions or ideas that they'd like to share around water. One of the things that really struck me when I was doing this presentation was tears and water. So tears in times of grief, tears in times of joy, and it's water with other substances leaking from our eyes, to be able to see water as sacred and ordinary outside of just our religious spaces and rituals would help us to, I think, acknowledge water in the environment and our place. So, but does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Questions, things they'd like to share, thoughts about how water is used in their religious spaces, or thoughts about how you use water in the ordinary? Whether or not I sound completely crazy, which is entirely no.
You know, it's fun. I'm Unitarian Universalist, and we have a tradition called the water communion. We do it in our church kind of at the end of the summer as people are kind of coming back from vacation. Well, with COVID, not so much vacations, but people bring some water from wherever, maybe somewhere they went over the summer or whatever, and we all poured into one shared container, and it's called the water communion. And this past summer, we did that ceremony outside, and we each shared where the water came from. And it was just really a lovely, kind of thoughtful thing that we did.
Yeah.
I put this in the chat, but I have been taking some classes about bread making as a spiritual practice. And one of the things we've really been focusing on is how once you add water to the ingredients of bread, it starts this process that can't be undone. You can never break the molecules back apart. You can't go back to having just flour and yeast. It transforms into something new. And I think that's the amazing thing about water is it transforms it into so many things and transforms within us into so many things.
Yeah. I want to throw out something, and I'm about to put Nicole E. and Haley Smith on the spot. So when hearing water being talked about in within the context of a theological framework, do you feel like you switch sides of your brain to be like, yeah, I don't think about water that way. I think about water in a more kind of the science, the science of it. Like how does it feel for you when you think about water in our lives? I know it's kind of broad, but I'm just thinking about, you might bring a scientific perspective, and then you might think about how other people may think about water in their religious spaces. And do you see those as separate or together, or all, I don't know.
I don't know that I would see them as separate. I'm not personally a religious person, but I can connect to some aspects of like eco-spirituality. And so the first thing that I think of when I think of water is how common it is between all living things. And so if you took water away from one organism, it could effectively, like my mind just goes to like ecosystem collapse. So like, let's say you take water away from wetlands. First you lose the foliage, then you lose all the organisms in the soil, all the fish, all the crustaceous species that lived there. And then ultimately that would come back to affect humans, and that wetlands protect a lot of us from things like hurricanes and the flooding that can happen during a hurricane is greatly absorbed by the presence of wetlands a lot of times. So by just taking water away from one thing, you've effectively caused like the collapse of hundreds of communities. So interconnectedness is where my head goes.
I'd be happy to chime in too, but I mean, I agree with Nicole E. Like, I'm not sure, but I think of it completely differently. But I also, so I come from more of like a traditional science background, but I now do more social science. So like a lot of what I think about even in my work is like how people interact with their environment, whether that's water, wildlife, trees, whatever. So, and I think even historically, actually a lot of my work in citizen science started with water. Like my first experience doing citizen science as like a teenager was at a summer camp doing water quality testing and stuff like that. So I definitely think it's like kind of how I first got into science in the environmental field, but I also think it's always been in a context of like stewarding my water, or like understanding, our connection to the environment and stuff like that. And yeah, I've done research on water in a lot of different contexts, like fishing and like food provision, or I actually did a study abroad in East Africa and did a lot of like water quality and public health stuff. So I think a lot of it, like water is so, intertwined with our lives. I think it is really hard for me, even, with that scientific angle to separate them, because so much of it comes back to how we as people interact with our water and our need for water and how we get clean water. So yeah.
So did anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Thank you, Nicole E. I call her Nicole E because we're working together. So it's like Nicole J and Nicole E, and we got to keep it straight in the emails, And thank you, Haley. Good morning, Susie.
Hello. I just thought I would add that I attended this because of our involvement with the Partners in Health and Wholeness through our church. And we have a community garden. So we're constantly, because it's raised beds, they dry out easily. We're constantly watering our gardens. So we're very aware of water, but I appreciate the perspectives that were brought today. And also I wanted to add that our pastor, Carla Griggs-Kern, is going on a sabbatical in May, and the theme of her sabbatical is living waters. And our church is going, during the 3 months approximately that she's gone, we are going to be emphasizing water in all that we do. And then when back, we're going to be having we're having a retreat at the beach, I know is one thing, but we're doing several other things and trying to add possibly some water features at our church, on our church grounds. So I'm not on that committee that is involved with her sabbatical, but this was just, it sounded very related, very, very relevant to what
Okay.
doing at church. So I figured that probably I'm taking some notes. That's why I didn't have my face on here. I'm just looking down at my paper, writing down things. But I was thinking that we might have you're recording this, so I might share the recording of it with the committee that's working on her sabbatical and see if there's a way that what you're doing here might fit in with what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll definitely be having some recordings. The Sacred Conversations will have a little bit of a a lot of a theological framework, and there'll be an accompanying what we call faith and health connection. That is sort of less of a theological framework and probably will bring a lot of the science about different aspects of our environment. So there will be that one next week on the 17th. And Nicole E. and Haley, they could, they'd be available maybe too, like if you wanted to have a presentation around water during that sabbatical, I can definitely share their information with you. And if y'all are interested in the pilot too. So that's one possibility. So thank you for sharing. Yeah. Yeah. Jessica put in the chat, which is really good to point out, and I'll have a follow-up question. I think we might wrap it up. So Jessica used to be stationed in Eastern North Carolina for Partners in Health and Wholeness. And she mentioned in the chat the unclean drinking water due to Gen X. And so I wanted to do two things. Jessica, if you could share just a little bit what you saw living in Wilmington and how people viewed what was happening, that would be great. And then I'm going to have a follow-up question. There's possibly Nicole E. and Haley, but what would be maybe some of the things that people should be thinking about when they think about water in North Carolina? Are there like specific water basins that are we should think about, like that are under stress? I'm going to use the word under stress. That might be good. So we'll Jessica first, and then I have that other question.
It was thanks, Nicole. Just a few thoughts about living in Wilmington with the Gen X. It was just very surreal to live in North Carolina and the United States of America. And I remember feeling a daily decision fatigue about kind of risk management when I would go out to eat, drinking water or getting coffee from a local coffee shop or places I knew used the public water. And at home, it was also a risk assessment of being green, because what we would do is we would buy water, filtered water, for our pets and for cooking and for drinking at home. And so we obviously we felt bad about that with the plastic use, but we were renters and we were not allowed to put in a filtration system. So we had to make the best decision for our health, because we still had to go out into the world and drink the water in Wilmington. And my wife actually worked at a coffee shop in Wilmington as a nursing student. And so we were definitely exposed to Gen X. And so we try to eliminate that at home. But in Wilmington, there was quite a lot of conversation and public attention around it, and we felt helpless, or at least I did. I shouldn't speak for the city of Wilmington, the people of Wilmington, but we did not feel empowered, because that's not something we can just go and fix. We can't just go up, hit the Cape Fear River and fix that problem. So we felt you have to depend on local government and powers that are far bigger than citizens. And so it was very enlightening. And Flint, Michigan and other places, I, in my own way, could understand those stories better. Thanks, Nicole.
I don't know if we're up next, but
Are we ready?
yeah. Did you want to start, Nicole, or?
Sure.
Okay.
I just like real quick looked up some stuff. But so North Carolina has 17 water basins. And I say North Carolina has loosely, because water doesn't conform to our arbitrary limits that we can sometimes try to put on it. And so those river basins are parts of other states as well. We are not in control of where all of our water flows. So even though we like to try to designate it by political barriers, I just like to acknowledge that that's not necessarily how it works. But some of those 17 river basins, 2 of them, the Neuse and the Cape Fear rivers, repeatedly experience harmful algal blooms, which is an indicator of nutrient overflow there, and that can cause fish kills and all kinds of nasty things, bacteria growth in the water that's unsafe for both the organisms that live there and humans as well. So, and then a lot of the water basins near the coast will experience that because of North Carolina's huge hog farming industry. So that's a pretty big deal in North Carolina.
Yeah. I'm also not like I'm not specifically a water expert, but yeah, so I mean, Jessica's story of the Gen X, or like the PFAS chemicals, I think is a big story that probably a lot of people have heard. And that's, I think, around the Cape Fear River Basin. And obviously that's, I don't know if you guys have heard a lot about PFAS, but they're like a huge buzzword, I feel like, around our water and health community and the science sphere. And so, because they are, everyone refers to them as like the forever chemicals. So there's a lot of concerns about like remediation and, even if we do some filtration, how long will they persist? So, long-term concerns with those chemicals. There have also been some issues with coal ash in water in other regions of North Carolina, like I think around Eden, North Carolina, north of Greensboro. I don't know a whole lot about that incident, but I know that it is still ongoing, and there still are like active, I don't know, but coal ash spreading things that are like sites that are trying to be shut down still in North Carolina as we speak. So that's kind of an ongoing issue too. And then, I mean, one that I've experienced, I grew up in, I guess Nicole, you probably did too, but I also grew up in North Carolina in Asheville. And I mean, even up in the mountains where I feel like we just get so much rain sometimes, and people call it like a temperate rainforest, like we still would have periods of drought some years. And I mean, I think even last year, a lot of North Carolina was in drought conditions. And so, I mean, even just availability of water, not even thinking about quality of water, can also be an ongoing concern. So yeah, I don't know how many of you have experienced, like watering limitations on being able to like water lawns and things like that. And I mean, obviously that happens a lot more places like out west, but I mean, even here in North Carolina can happen even on a yearly basis sometimes. So yeah.
Thank you, Nicole E. and Haley. Yeah. So if anybody else has anything to add, now's a good time. If not, thank you for participating. I can send you more information about the pilot initiative. We're going to be having more webinars, both on kind of the science side of things and within a theological framework. We're going to try to have some engaged parts where we have webinar participants have group discussions around different topics within a theological framework and a science framework. There's the pilot initiative. There'll be some other pieces around that. Participants will be able to get their water tested. We'll have iNaturalist, where youth groups, children ministries could use that to take people from out of just the buildings of our religious spaces into the outdoors. We'll also have flu near you, and that was just my adding, because I was like, flu season is coming, but we're in the middle of a pandemic and the flu doesn't seem so bad right now, you know? So I will send more information out about those parts. Thank everybody for coming today. I'm very excited. We'll get to talk about water. We'll have a possibility to talk about soil, air, all these different pieces. We have some faith communities already signed up for the pilot initiative. And if your community is not one of those, just reach out to me, Nicole@ncchurches.org. Yeah, so thank you. We're gonna have, let me give it like 30 seconds if anybody has anything to add. I'm a chatterer. I just tend to keep going. After, if nobody has anything to add, then Krista is going to do a closing for us. So, yeah.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Nicole E. and Haley, for joining us today. We're going to do two things. We're going to do the traditional 3 deep breaths, and then I have a reading related to water. It's short. And it goes along really nicely with the theme. Kind of pulled it out. So, all right. If you take a moment, I'll count off the first deep breath. And after that, you can take the next 2. 1. Okay, this reading is from Mel Hoover and Rose Eddington. It's called All Water is One Water. Water unites us. All water is one water, shape-shifting as it goes on in its unending cycle. The stream we gather by unites us with all the waters of the world, for all life depends on water. That's why this common, everyday element on which our very lives depend is sacred. In our thankfulness for water, let us remember to honor, cherish, and care for it, for our own lives, for all life touched by water, and for those who come after us. Amen. Thanks, everyone. You're muted.
You think I'd be used to this by now. How long have we been doing Zoom? Like, seriously. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Krista, for that lovely, beautiful closing. I feel like going to go sit next to some water now, sit next to a stream or river and think about it. So if there's anything anybody would like to add, or if they'd just like to say goodbye, you can you can unmute yourselves. That's also another PHW tradition. And then Nicole E. and Haley will stay on just for a quick chat debrief. So thank you, Susie and Angie and Alice and everyone for participating.
Thank y'all. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you all.
Bye.
Very good.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.